Welcome to the Objective Recovery podcast, where we talk about addiction and recovery very open-mindedly. I'm especially looking forward to speaking with today's guest, Katie Lain, because we had similar experiences with alcohol use disorder and recovery. Katie struggled with drinking for a while before she found the scientifically and medically validated treatment known as the Sinclair Method, which involves taking the medication naltrexone and the process of behavioral extinction that we will discuss. Inspired by her success, Katie then founded Thrive Alcohol Recovery, an organization that offers the Sinclair Method to clients. Katie, I'm so excited to speak with you. I don't often meet others who recovered with the Sinclair Method. So please tell us about your experience.
Yeah, when you reached out, I was so excited to learn about the work you're doing and that you are also someone who personally struggled with alcohol and got free through this marvelous life-changing treatment that so many people still don't know about, which is crazy, even though it's been around for 30 years. The research was conducted, like we were talking about before we hit record, it was conducted in the 90s. So yeah, a bit about me. I struggled with my drinking for nearly 10 years. I tried to quit drinking or moderate my drinking during that time countless times. Like I knew it was a problem, but I couldn't seem to find the solution to the problem. I kind of believed that, abstinence was the only way to go about it. If I can't moderate, then clearly, I shouldn't be drinking. And so I genuinely tried to quit drinking probably dozens of times over the course of a near 10-year period. And I found that I would make it, a couple days, couple weeks. I made it 6 months one time, but my challenge was that I really always wanted to drink during that time, like very much white knuckling it, kind of resisting that urge. And in the back of my mind, if I'm honest, like I would think, I know I'm going to drink again one day. It's just a matter of how long like this stint of sobriety will last. Um, but I was really struggling. Like I didn't want to keep this alcohol dependence going. I really wanted to find an answer, but like I said, I couldn't stay sober. I couldn't moderate. I was always looking for alternative treatments. I was like, there's got to be something else out there that I'm missing. And that's when in 2017, I stumbled upon, a now viral TEDx talk about one woman, one actress named Claudia Christian, who overcame her own alcohol dependence through a neuroscience treatment called the Sinclair Method using the medication naltrexone. It honestly sounded too good to be true because with this treatment, as it doesn't require abstinence. People start it while they're still drinking. They don't have to quit drinking. The treatment just helps you drink less and have more control over alcohol. So I feel like when I learned about that, it was like the answer I'd been searching for. And I was also like, this seems way too good to be true. I thought this is just another celebrity kind of pushing something to make money or something like that. But I knew I had to try it. And so my first step was getting a prescription to naltrexone, which was surprisingly a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I had to reach out to 5 different doctors in my area. They all refused a prescription, wanted me to go to rehab or AA or detox. So a lot has changed since then. Like it's definitely more accessible to get naltrexone today through telemedicine and more doctors are aware of it. But I still encounter people regularly who tell me, oh, I asked my doctor for it and they refused a prescription. This medicine's been approved by the FDA for 30 years. It's shown to help with alcohol addiction, yet for some reason a lot of general doctors aren't willing to prescribe it. I think because they don't get a lot of training in addiction medicine in school, and there's just like this huge lack of awareness around the use of it. It's really underutilized. So anyway, I learned about it. I finally did find a prescription to naltrexone through an online doctor, and that started my journey in July of 2017 to, what feels like today, like the alcohol addiction I had for 10 years has almost been erased from my brain. It took me about 9 months on the treatment to get there. And just over the course of that time, I started it as a daily binge drinker. Having an alcohol-free day was pretty rare for me and something I usually forced unless I was like trying to quit drinking and then I could go longer. But on any given week, I was drinking every day, binge drinking every day. And on this treatment, over time, I just started to see that my craving for alcohol was starting to reduce, which is something that I didn't realize how much I was thinking about drinking until that chatter started to quiet down. And I was like, whoa, my mind feels more expansive and open. This is crazy. So I noticed my cravings for alcohol starting to fade away. I was having more alcohol-free days. When I was drinking, I wasn't blacking out anymore. And as I continued on the treatment, it just progressed from there. And I was on it for a year, drinking less and less and less. Eventually got to a place where I was drinking like once or twice a month. And then after a little more than a year on the treatment, I ended up quitting drinking. I tell people by accident because I never planned to quit. It just sort of happened as I lost interest in alcohol and went longer and longer and longer without drinking. And so now I have like no desire to drink thanks to this treatment, which is a stark contrast of trying to quit drinking before the Sinclair method, where all I wanted to do was drink every day. I was just fighting that urge. And now through this treatment, through what's called pharmacological extinction of the addiction, which is the Sinclair method, I have zero desire to drink. And I think last thing I'll say, the cool thing about this treatment is if I want to drink, I can. And so it's no longer this forbidden fruit. I would just follow the Sinclair method protocol, which, by the way, it's taking naltrexone 1 hour before drinking. That helps retrain the brain over time. It also helps the brain, once you unlearn the addiction, it prevents the brain from relearning it. So if I wanted to drink today, I could easily do it. I have naltrexone. I would just take it before I drank, and I would probably have 1 or 2 drinks and call it a night. But again, just the desire for alcohol is like, it's just non-existent. So it's really easy for me to not drink.
I had very similar experience. So, are you still drinking sometimes, or you quit completely?
I quit completely in 2018. I don't even remember the last day that I drank because I wasn't planning to quit. I
Yeah.
drank one last time in a restaurant and then yeah, I never drank again.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's been quite a while since I've drank, and of course I don't take naltrexone anymore because I was only taking it before I was drinking.
Before you tried the Sinclair method and naltrexone, you mentioned that you experimented, explored the abstinence-based method. So, what have you tried, and what didn't work for you?
Initially, I tried just taking like breaks from alcohol, like 7-day breaks or 30-day breaks. And that was actually the first time I realized I had a drinking problem. I was like sitting there one day drinking, and I was like, when was the last day that I haven't drank? And I couldn't remember, like it had been more than a year. So that scared me a little bit. And I was like, I'm going to take a week off of alcohol, and thinking it would be no big deal. It would just be like a little bit of discipline, like how I'm not going to eat sugar this week. Like it's not the end of the world. But with alcohol, it was different. I wanted to drink so badly every day. I was like taking a sleeping pill and going to bed at 7 o'clock just to not have to sit through the alcohol cravings. And I made it the 7 days, but it was really, really hard. And I wanted to drink every day. And then I just went back to drinking again. And that was kind of the introduction to the cycle of trying to quit and then returning to drinking again. So I would try to take breaks, like 7-day breaks, or those like dry January, sober October, things like that. Usually wasn't successful with the full 30 days, though I would have intentions to do it. I went to 2 AA meetings. I just knew that wasn't for me. The specific group in my area, it was like I was like in my 20s and it was like men in their 60s. Like I just didn't vibe with them. What I kind of dove into a lot was like quote unquote personal development. Like I figured if I could just find like the source of my trauma, or my purpose in life, or the root reason why I drink, then I won't want to drink anymore. And I would go on personal retreats or read books or go to conferences and really just kind of looking at if I could develop myself more and be a better person, maybe the desire for alcohol would fade away. And for me, that never worked. Again, it might be like a temporary thing, but that craving, that compulsion to drink was what never went away and always drove me back to drinking again. I remember thinking like, well, I just need to hit that rock bottom that people are talking about. Like maybe if life gets so bad, then I will want to quit. And it was starting to get that way where I did not get a DUI, but I got pulled over. I should have gotten a DUI, but for some reason the cop let me go. So that was something that scared me. And then I also got really sick where I had a bilateral pulmonary embolism in my lungs and I almost died. Literally, I was like in the hospital in critical care. And the reason for it was probably a combination of hormonal birth control and my drinking. The two kind of cause these blood clots. Plus, I have a propensity to develop blood clots just in my genes. I didn't know that at the time, but I was in the hospital and the doctor was like, you know, your drinking could contribute to this. We're going to put you on medication you can't drink on. And I was like, maybe this is it. This is the rock bottom. But then 4 days after I got out of the hospital, I was drinking again, even though I was on a medication I wasn't supposed to drink on. So that just showed me how illogical my alcohol addiction was. Like I was literally in a critical health condition and I kept drinking. That was my journey of kind of the different things I tried and, you know, wake up calls I had that still did not get me sober.
Thank you. I very much relate to almost everything that you described, so including the suggestions to just keep going to meetings. I also tried many of those different programs, and people suggesting that if we continue doing that, those cravings subside, and you know, it's just we just have to wait it out. And that was also my biggest issue. I was also always very surprised that some people did report that people who took the abstinence route and succeeded with that faster, that they reported that their craving, they basically, once they decided that they wanted to take it seriously, they no longer experience those crazy cravings that it sounds like you and I definitely can relate to. And so it seems like it's very diverse in terms of how people experience and what kind of symptoms they have. So did you consider other choices for your cravings? You mentioned that I also saw that Claudia Christian's TED Talk that I think you were referring to, and exactly the same reaction. I find it very interesting, and I looked at I was familiar with the research, but I didn't believe it would work for me. Very similar skepticism. So did you consider alternative options, other medications for cravings and so on?
Well, to be honest, when I learned about naltrexone and the Sinclair method, I wasn't even aware that a medication was an option because I figured if there was a medication, I would have known about it. Like, you know, it would have been more common knowledge. And it's just crazy that, you know, naltrexone and some of these other medicines that are really effective, they've been around for so long, but people don't know about them. So before I learned about naltrexone, I didn't know about medications, but I did try like cutting out sugar or doing a ketogenic diet, which is like all fat, no carbs. And I remember I got really into a ketogenic diet for a few months and it helped me cut down my drinking. And I was like, maybe it's helping with cravings. But then I just had like zero energy because I guess my body needs carbs. Like I went and saw a doctor and she was like, you need to eat more carbs. Like your body needs that to survive. My hair was like breaking off too. So clearly that was not the diet for me. But I was like, maybe it helped with my cravings, but I can't really say for sure. It wasn't obviously substantial enough to make a difference to help me reduce or quit. So literally, I just believed at the time that like abstinence was the only option. And if you wanted it bad enough, you would do it. And I just remember I would watch a lot of AA like videos, testimonies on YouTube to get inspiration from people who quit. And I just remember always thinking like, but how did you do it? Like, yes, you've done it. Your life is better now. You're thankful, but like, how did you stay sober? And I feel like the thing that wasn't talked about from what I remember a lot is just that overwhelming urge to drink, even though, you know, to the world, they're sober, they're not drinking, but what's going on in the mind? Are you really free or do you want to drink every day still? And I just remember that was my struggle. Like I felt really trapped in that state of mind. Again, not totally aware of what was going on. Like I don't know if I would have called it an alcohol craving. I just wanted to drink every day. And it was through getting on naltrexone when that started to quiet down, I was like, whoa, my brain feels like open and expansive. I'm not just like obsessing on getting that next drink. And something I find fascinating, and I don't know if you could speak to this too, but like when we're addicted to alcohol, it's almost like we're equating it to a survival need, from what I understand, that pleasure part of our brain. And so for me, it's always almost like when I'm fasting and I'm really, really hungry because I'm not eating food, for example, all I do is think about food. Like I'm romanticizing meals and what I want to cook and all of that. It's just this obsession. And when I fast from food, I was like, this is how it used to be with alcohol. It was like, whenever I try to quit drinking, I would just hyper fixate on alcohol, think about it, romanticize it, wish I could have it. And that was not freedom for me. And that's why it was almost easier just to say, screw it, I'm going to drink. Because like fighting that urge to do something, it was just so exhausting.
So would you say that you drank for to experience that pleasure, the high, the euphoria, or was it some kind of self-medication of some negative states as well?
I think it was honestly both. I think I probably drank more for the reward euphoria, but I certainly drank for the escape and numbing as well. I was a daily drinker for nearly 10 years, so I think I taught myself to use alcohol no matter the circumstance. So if I was really stressed with work or whatever, I would use it to numb. If I was depressed, it would lift up my mood for the moment, but make me more depressed the next day. But yeah, I think it was for both, to be honest.
So the reason I asked about the different options, if you consider, because when I started my journey, when I was looking for solutions for the cravings specifically, I tried other things, but for the cravings, I considered another medication called acamprosate, Campral, that I'm sure you know. So that's another, the people usually take it while they are abstaining, so they don't drink with it. And so I considered that as well. And one reason why I chose naltrexone, I basically asked my doctor for it as well, was because I definitely figured out that I drank primarily for the pleasure, for the relaxation, for, helping me sleep, helping me wind down. So more for the positive reward, as you said, the reward, rather than to mask negative mood states. And so basically, just for the listeners, the way naltrexone works, it's an opioid receptor antagonist. So it blocks opioid receptors in the brain, and it blocks that pathway that generates the euphoria, right? And it also in turn interferes with dopamine signaling. So dopamine and the opioid systems interact in the brain, and so that's also in the long run, especially if we continue the treatment, it can also reduce the dopamine hits that we get from the drinking. So the subjective experience of that is what you also described, is this feeling that it's not that interesting anymore. So that's
Yeah.
exactly because we don't have that chemical dopamine peaks. Spikes in the brain anymore, and so that was my reason. So I chose very kind of strategically at that point naltrexone over the other medication. So did you go straight to the Sinclair method, or did you also at least consider taking just naltrexone and trying to abstain with it?
So at the time, I only knew about the Sinclair method. I didn't really know of naltrexone as like an anti-craving medication if you wanted to abstain. I knew about, oh, you can take this medicine before drinking and it will help you drink less. That was kind of my basic understanding. And to be honest, I was really excited about that because I didn't want to quit drinking at that time. And I like at the time maybe would have been ashamed to admit that. But the truth is, I was still very much addicted to alcohol. It had been my companion for 10 years, even though it was causing more and more problems in my life. It's so socially acceptable, it's everywhere. There were, good times with it. And so the fact that I could start a treatment that would help me have more control without quitting was just like the golden ticket. I was like, this is incredible. So I did that treatment right away. I didn't even really understand how it worked when I went on it, to be honest. I just saw it as like, oh, this pill can help me drink less. I didn't understand at the time how much addiction is a function of brain changes and that this medication could help like eliminate the desire and craving for alcohol. And I think that was a surprise to me and also just one of the biggest gifts of this treatment, just quieting that desire for me to drink. So yeah, and when I started the treatment again, I was a daily binge drinker and I could see a difference in the first week. Like it was subtle, but it was enough for me to know like something is changing. Like I'm not thinking about alcohol as much. I had an alcohol-free day, which, wasn't totally white knuckled and forced. I could just see things kind of gradually changing. And that was the first time I had genuine hope around, okay, maybe I finally found the answer I've been looking for.
The reason I asked about the, what was on your mind when you first started is because we can also ask the question that you mentioned that you struggled with finding a doctor who would prescribe naltrexone. So I'm curious to hear your side of why. So I did not have that struggle, but when I went to I asked my primary care doctor, so it wasn't specialized organization that specializing in that like your company now, or a psychiatrist even, or an addiction specialist. And my primary care doctor didn't even know that he could prescribe naltrexone. So it was so funny, that conversation. I was there for my annual physical, and I mentioned that I'm ready, I feel ready to try something. And so he told me very, very, very quickly that I would have to refer you to a specialist. I was wondering, I asked him, are you sure? And so luckily he checked online and he figured, yeah, it seems like I can actually prescribe this. I was actually his first patient ever that he prescribed naltrexone for. But at the time he was just reading in front of me their literature, the instructions have to prescribe this. And so I think most doctors are still not familiar with the Sinclair method, that, when we take it while we drink. He was just looking at the instructions for taking it to alleviate cravings while also abstaining by not drinking. And that's what I wanted to try first, and that's what I tried first. And so he basically gave me, just left me with those instructions: take the pill every day and not drink. And I wanted to try that. I did try that for a month, and I just failed in the end of that month. So
Yeah.
that's why I switched the Sinclair method by being still skeptical. And then since then, I've spoken with many doctors who are not specialists, addiction, substance use specialists, and many of them are familiar with naltrexone, but that's their knowledge. They know that it can help reduce cravings, and then people take it and try not to drink. So still not many professionals are familiar with the Sinclair method. So I'm just curious about your opinion, your experience. Why do you think that is, that people don't know about the Sinclair method or don't trust it?
Well, I think there's a few different reasons. Number one, naltrexone is a generic medication, and so there's not money for it to be marketed. So, there's no initiative to raise awareness about it. Now, there's the shot form of it, Vivitrol, which, like, just to compare the cost of that, which is like a patented form of naltrexone that's a monthly shot, that's like over $1,000 for 1 month, whereas generic naltrexone is like $20 to $30 a month. Vivitrol has had more of a marketing budget behind it, like more doctors are kind of pushing that over naltrexone sometimes. I don't really understand all of the pharmaceutical industry and how the finances work in that space, but I do find that interesting. So number one, I think because it's a generic medicine and it's, there's not money to be made on it. The second thing is there was a period of time for a while that naltrexone had a black box warning on it that it was really damaging for your liver. And that was since removed, which apparently it's really rare for a black box warning to be removed from a medicine, but there was petitions done to communicate that this medication is not damaging or dangerous for your liver. It could be if you're taking super high doses, but that's nowhere near the dose we're recommending. But some doctors still believe, or pharmacists believe, that this black box warning is still on it, or they have this like notion in their mind that it still is. And so they're hesitant to prescribe it, believing that it's not safe. Because of the current way that it's been used for alcohol addiction, which is, like you were saying, take it daily to help with cravings and don't drink, that's the on-label way to prescribe it. So if people go to their doctor, sometimes the doctor is not willing to prescribe it because what I've been told by them is that, well, we don't get addiction medicine training. We don't specialize in it. We're kind of taught to refer people out. So that's like one reason doctors won't prescribe. They don't feel comfortable necessarily. But if your doctor does prescribe it, they will probably prescribe it like what happened to you, where someone's given it to take daily with cravings. And What's really interesting, I've learned a lot from my medical advisor, Dr. Volpicelli, who was literally responsible for getting it approved by the FDA in the 90s for alcohol treatment. He's like been researching it and using it for decades. What he told me is that in the medical community, there is this consensus that naltrexone doesn't work and people don't get refills. So like once a patient is prescribed naltrexone, typically they don't go back for another prescription. They stop taking it. So there's this belief in the medical community that adherence to naltrexone is really bad. And that is really baffling to me because in my work, the people I work with, they're on naltrexone for like a year or more, most people, and they're consistent with it because the longer we take it, the better it works. But what he has experienced in practice is that people aren't sticking with it beyond the first prescription, the first 30 days. And so my hypothesis why that is that they're going to the doctor like you did. They don't know about the Sinclair method and their doctor's telling them to take it and it helps with cravings. And they try it for a month and they're still craving alcohol. And so they're like, this doesn't work. And so they stop taking it. Or they believe they're not allowed to drink on it because it's damaging for the liver. So if they want to return to drinking, they stop taking naltrexone, which is counterintuitive to how the medication works. And so I think that a lot of doctors, like I've gone to conferences and like tried to advocate for this, and I just find a lot of like experts in the addiction treatment field are very unexcited about naltrexone. They're like, yeah, we know about it, no big deal, whatever, what's the next thing? Basically, that's kind of the feedback I've gotten from people. And I just think there's this like massive misunderstanding about how it works most effectively. The fact that it needs to be taken long term, that it's not an instant fix like a Tylenol, you take it and the headache goes away. Naltrexone doesn't work like that. And then just kind of why more specifically, naltrexone, first of all, is not very used or known, but the Sinclair method is even more so. And I think because the belief has existed for nearly 100 years that abstinence is the only treatment for alcohol addiction. At a conference, a medical doctor who's been in the field for decades told me, he's like, we just believe abstinence is best, so we don't support that treatment, which is just crazy. Like, sure, abstinence is safest, but if you look at the stats, like most people relapse in abstinence-based treatments, like 80% or more of them within 6 months. So there's this kind of dogmatic belief about what it means to recover from alcohol addiction. And since the Sinclair method allows you to drink, that's kind of a no-no with a lot of people in the field. And I think initially, from what I understand with the research that was done with Dr. Sinclair, he was kind of seen as a quack. Like people didn't take him seriously because he was proposing that, the opioid receptors or that reward system in the brain had something to do with alcohol addiction. And that just wasn't the consensus back then. So the fact that he was kind of suggesting that alcohol addiction is a learned behavior and not like a moral failing or a character defect or an allergy to alcohol, I think it was kind of radical back then. And so it just never took off. And to this day, some doctors kind of see him as a quack, which is crazy to me because I'm like, his treatment has helped so many people. It was a real, like game changer when he discovered that. So that's a little bit, and like the final thing I'll say is like rehab centers, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I've heard this from others as well, that, there's not an incentive for them to put people on a medication that is really cheap and generic and they can take it home and it could help with craving or drinking less. Like to go to a $30,000 a month rehab where you have to stay there and you're probably going to relapse and be a return customer, like there's a lot of money to be made there. And so there's not really an incentive for the people who are like the real players in the field to promote naltrexone because it would hurt their bottom line.
Yeah, the industry. So that argument for the abstinence, preferring abstinence, that's very archaic. But the professionals I work with these days, usually they either offer harm reduction type treatments themselves, or at least they recognize, they agree that has a place, and harm reduction is very effective. So just to make it clear that what we are talking about, so the Sinclair method is a form of harm reduction, since we don't stop drinking immediately. And it's so bizarre to me that still, because there is so much scientific evidence and medical evidence for the effectiveness of harm reduction, and what you said yourself, that abstinence just doesn't work. It fails for many people. And then what do we do with those people? We can't just, let them die, let them just, wither away. So no, there is another solution. There is harm reduction. And so even the medical community still sometimes perceives harm reduction and abstinence as two mutually exclusive methods. And I think the Sinclair method is a very a good example that they are not necessarily mutually exclusive. So your story, we have very similar stories because we started with the harm reduction, still drinking, taking naltrexone, and then eventually quit drinking and stayed quit. So it's a process that starts with harm reduction, leads to long-term abstinence, right?
100%.
So this is what many people, in my opinion, still don't recognize, that we don't need to have these fights anymore. It's just give that up, because it can be options or it can be just parts of a process, a long-term process. Going back to your personal experience a bit, did you experience any challenges with the naltrexone and Sinclair method when you started, and side effects or any struggles?
Thankfully, not really. My doctor, she was knowledgeable about how naltrexone works, so she had me start at a half a dose for the first few times, just in case there were side effects. And I was sleepy, my stomach was a little bit upset. I was a little out of it, but that was maybe the first time I took naltrexone. Then it was a little bit more mild the second time, and then I was taking the full dose and didn't really have any side effects. And there were times when I would like make a note to myself that I took it because I couldn't remember if I took it and didn't feel anything. Sometimes the medication made me feel irritable, which I've heard this from others. I've done a survey, and I think in my survey results, like 50% of people had that side effect of the people I pulled, but it wasn't every time I took it. So I don't know like what that was about. But generally speaking, like no, like this, I had early side effects that were pretty mild and they went away. And the longer I was on the Sinclair method, the less I was taking naltrexone, because I was only drinking like once a month toward the end. So when I was taking the medication once a month, my body like wasn't used to it anymore. And so I could have more side effects pop up because I was taking it so infrequently. I even personally, the last few times I drank, I only took a half a tablet, like 25 milligrams of naltrexone, because the standard therapeutic dose is 50 milligrams, but I took half and it was completely sufficient to, continue blocking the, endorphin reward and help me drink moderately. I was fortunate. I know some people have like nausea or other side effects that persist, but I think for most of us, like they're mild and they go away. Well, what was your experience?
So I had the nausea in the beginning, but it was only for as far as I remember, like a few days really. It completely went away, and then I would take it with food, and when I took it with food, then it didn't happen. But maybe because I only experienced it. I tried without food the first 2 days, I think, and then I switched to taking with food. So maybe it was because my body got used to it, and it doesn't matter whether or not you take it with food. You can tell me if you have different experiences from clients and so on. But then that part completely went away. The other part that was quite persistent for me, maybe what you described as irritability. I was thinking while you said it, maybe it's exactly what I also experienced. So I usually call it unable to focus, and a bit like just feeling down a bit. It's not like depression. It's not really a depressed state, but it's just not. It's a negative mood state. That's
Yeah.
just like very difficult to describe. So for me, that was quite persistent till the end, but I found a way around it. So I would time my drinking. I didn't drink every day, so I had more freedom around it. And I would usually time it for days when I was quite busy in the beginning of the day, and then I would work or do something, and then take the pill, and then to avoid thinking about the negative effects, I would engage in some activity. So exercise, going out for a walk, or sometimes for a run. I would arrange calls like this so that, I'm distracted. I'm not thinking about how I'm feeling. And I think that can be a good tool for
That's
someone.
great advice. I love that. And I will say, like, for me, the negative effects I had from the naltrexone, like, they weren't very severe, but like it was a small price to pay for the freedom I got. Like, it
Yeah,
was
exactly, exactly.
100% worth it.
That's what I think we should keep in mind. So another one that I had was the day after. So when I drank, I would still sometimes drink. I reduced my quantity, the how much I drank. I reduced that quite quickly, actually, from the first episode. But it was still a lot. So it was not like for a normal drinker. So I would still drink the equivalent of 3, 4, 5 drinks. And of course, then I had the hangovers. And so I noticed that naltrexone actually often made my hangovers much worse. Did you have
Oh.
anything like that or any of your clients?
Yeah, I hear that from people. We call it the now over, where the
Yeah,
hangover
exactly.
is
Yeah.
worse.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I didn't really notice that until the very, like, maybe the last 4 or 5 months of my treatment, when I was drinking like once or twice a month. And I remember I wasn't clear if it was like because I wasn't used to the naltrexone anymore or because my tolerance for alcohol was so much lower, the combination of the two perhaps. But I remember if I drank a beer, for example, I wouldn't really have a hangover, but if I had a glass of red wine, I would have a more intense hangover. It was a process for me. It was also kind of like motivating, like, okay, well, if having one drink is making me feel hungover, like, I don't really feel like drinking, like it's not really worth it. And I think for some people that's hard because they want to still have those days where they, have a few drinks and kind of let loose. And if they're met with that hangover the next day because their body's not tolerating it anymore, it's kind of like, oh man, like I can't drink like I used to. Which for me, I use that to my advantage. I was like, this is a motivating factor just to drink less, or think about my relationship with alcohol and what I want it to look like. But I definitely hear that from people. They have that more intensified hangover. I also hear people say that they don't have as much of a hangover. So naltrexone is so interesting. I don't know what you think about this, but like there's people too who they take it and they get really, really sleepy, and other people who take it and they get insomnia. And I'm just like, this is so interesting, kind of the opposite side effects some people experience that I've worked with.
I think it's like individual backgrounds and predispositions. So that euphoria, that pathway is there for a reason. That's a big part of, motivation, how we get motivated. So, people who get maybe sleepy or they don't want to do as much, it's because it reduces actually a completely normal, natural mechanism that, that's there for that reason. So then, we lose that. Then we won't be as motivated, or we just want to go to bed. And I think the individual differences are because there is a lot of variability between people. So actually, another reason why I decided to try naltrexone was because it has been shown that naltrexone works especially well in people with certain genetic backgrounds.
Mhm.
That means that a certain people who carry specific DNA sequences or mutations. And so interestingly, and I had my genome sequenced, and I analyzed it, and I knew that I had that kind of background, that mutation. So I thought that maybe I'm an especially good candidate. That was another reason. So I'm just mentioning this because for the individual variability, and we have lots of those. And then, these medications interfere with neurobiological pathways. So those side effects are not surprising at all. And also, in my opinion, the fact that different people experience different types, because we have all those, variabilities in the mechanisms, whether it's genetic or other ways. So not everyone is the same. And what was your subjective experience of the extinction? First of all, let's just define for the viewers what extinction is and what was their experience with it.
Yeah, so extinction is short for pharmacological extinction of alcohol addiction. It's basically another term for the Sinclair method. The Sinclair method was named after Dr. David Sinclair, who discovered pharmacological extinction. And basically, what this means is that his proposition in theory, and I think it's being more adapted today, is that alcohol addiction is actually a learned behavior in the brain, because your brain gets a lot of reward from drinking. And when you do that repeatedly, the brain gets used to the reward, craves the reward, needs the reward to feel normal. It just gets used to it. The brain adapts. So because alcohol addiction is a learned behavior, learned by experiencing endorphin reward from drinking, his proposition in his research was that, well, it can be unlearned. If you block that reward from alcohol or blunt it or mute it, then the brain can gradually unlearn it because it won't be getting the same reward, and it'll no longer see alcohol as a reward over time. Because you drink on the medicine, you don't get the reward. You're doing the behavior, but not getting the reward. So over time, what can happen is the addiction gets extinguished in the brain. And that essentially means, in layman's terms, like it gets reversed in the brain. Your brain gets restored back to the place it was in pre-addiction, before your brain had ever learned the addiction. And when that happens, objectively, a lot of people, I worked with over 1,000 people by now on this treatment. We don't crave alcohol anymore. Like the thought of drinking just doesn't occur. It's not this compulsion or desire. Those cravings just go away. People can still drink after pharmacological extinction if they want to. And usually when they drink, they'll take naltrexone before, and typically they can't overdrink anymore. Maybe they'll have a couple drinks, one drink, and then stop. They just get this off switch because the brain isn't getting flooded with all that endorphin reward from alcohol. And most people at pharmacological extinction just spend most of their time alcohol free, again, because the desire to drink isn't there. And this is a process that's realized over time. It takes time. Like it took me about 8 or 9 months. I would say that's average. Some people get there faster, others take longer. There's a lot of factors that go into how quickly someone reaches that point. But for me, my subjective experience was basically what a lot of others experienced, to where I just didn't want to drink anymore. Like one simple way I like to describe it, it's like alcohol became my least favorite food, where, I don't like raw oysters. So if everyone around me is having raw oysters and offering them to me and, the best raw oysters in town, I can easily say no. I'm just like, nope, I'm good. Like, you guys enjoy. I don't need any. That's how I feel about alcohol now. Like everyone can be drinking around me and I just have no desire to drink. Like my brain doesn't register anymore that alcohol is a reward. And this was a process that happened over time, little by little, as I was craving alcohol less, drinking less, thinking about it less. And I reached this point again about 8 or 9 months on the Sinclair Method. And I knew I was there when like a month or two had gone by, and I was drinking like once or twice a month. When I was drinking, it was like from a very conscious place, like, oh, it's Friday night, we're going to that Italian restaurant, I'm going to get a glass of wine. It wasn't like, I need that wine, like I need to go to the store, it's just like a conscious choice. And then when I was drinking, I usually couldn't even finish a drink. I would have like one drink and I would just feel satisfied. Like the thought of another one would repulse me a little bit. And I was finding that I was like happily spending most of my time alcohol free, where like drinking just didn't appeal to me most days. And I wanted to do anything else but drink. So that's how I knew I was there. And that's the experience I would say most people who do the Sinclair Method and stick with the treatment long term, that's what they experience as well.
Usually it's the recommendation for the long-term perspective is that if we ever think about drinking again, we should always take the naltrexone. So have you ever tried not taking the medication and drinking again, or any of your clients? And what happens, especially in someone who has already reached the extinction state before?
I personally have never tried some, like I'll have non-alcoholic beers, or I'll make like a tiramisu that has Kahlua in it, or we'll cook with wine, and like the wine, I can taste the wine like it didn't all evaporate. So that's like the extent of alcohol that I've consumed since reaching extinction. And for me, it doesn't like trigger me to like want to drink or anything. It's such a small amount. But like that's been my experience. And I know people, maybe if they're in AA or something, they couldn't do that. That would just like trigger them to want to go back. But for me, that's been a non-issue totally. If I were to ever drink again one day, like have a drink, I would take naltrexone. I just don't want to risk my brain firing back up again and relearning that alcohol addiction. It was just like so much suffering and terrible experience. So I would always take naltrexone before. I've worked with people over the years, a handful of them, who have drink without naltrexone again, most of them relearn alcohol addiction. They will tell me that they feel totally confident, totally cured, quote unquote, totally free. And they're like, okay, I got this. I have control over alcohol again. And within a month or two, they've relearned it. Like they're drinking without naltrexone, the brain fires back up again, and they're back to where they were when they started the method. I've seen that a lot. I've seen a handful of people who were able to reintroduce alcohol again without naltrexone and keep it in moderation. That's more the rare case. I have seen it though. And I think in those people, they really have a lot more discipline around their drinking. They're not drinking when they're upset. They're drinking with meals, they're drinking once or twice a month or something like that. So it is possible. But just, I think the more common scenario is people go back to it and redevelop it again and have to do the Sinclair method again.
Yeah, that's a very important point to remember. I still keep a prescription, an active prescription. I don't no longer take because I don't drink. I don't have really strong cravings anymore, but I have desires for other behaviors that were associated with my drinking, and I tend to crave those. If I crave anything, I tend to crave those, and then I take my naltrexone. That's what. But it's just very rare at this point. I just always keep it in my cabinet. It's not a difficult thing to do. So just in case. So let's switch a bit to what you are doing professionally. So you offer the Sinclair method to clients with Thrive, right? So just talk a bit about that process, how it works.
When I started having success with the Sinclair method, I started sharing my story online because I was just blown away that this treatment was working and nobody was really talking about it, especially in 2017. It was, except for Claudia's TED Talk, like there wasn't really much else out there. So I started documenting my journey. That kind of led me to coaching people in groups and one-on-one formats. And then through coaching, I realized like there needs to be a more comprehensive program to walk people through this treatment because it's, as you know, it's like a longer term process. Like minimally, it takes 3 months for someone to get to pharmacological extinction. That's more rare. Usually, again, it takes like 9 months to a year. A lot of people in our program actually are on it for more than a year. They've reduced their drinking by like 75%, but they're still not quite where they want to be because some sticky habits or things like that. So yeah, I developed a program that really guides people through the Sinclair method. It offers the treatment, and then we walk them through we kind of break it into 3 phases of the treatment where they're just getting introduced to the medicine and the treatment and getting that process mastered, and then moving into behavior change, habit change, cultivating new coping skills. And then phase 3 is like, well, what does my life look like with this different relationship with alcohol, and kind of rediscovering life beyond this disorder. So we have a whole online program. It's private. It's worldwide technically, but if people join from other countries, they already need to have their prescription because we only work with doctors in the US. But we do have people from around the world. And yeah, it's a private online support where people have videos and access to coaches and doctors and therapists to support them through this journey, and a wonderful community as well of people who are all using this treatment, like very non-judgmental. We're not there to like condemn or demand perfection. In fact, our members set their own goals and we just help them work toward them.
Yeah, we will put all this in the description. So it involves naltrexone, coaching, and community. Is that?
Yes, and lots of other things as well, but that's the core of it. Yeah.
Okay, and I know that you also have a podcast. I was a guest on yours a couple of weeks ago, so we will highlight it as well. So there are many interesting stories there as well. So it can be very informative to look at. I find it very, in my own journey, I find it very, very, very helpful to speak with people who were more experienced with the Sinclair method at that time. And they were encouraging when I was losing my my
Exactly.
confidence in the beginning. So I think that's very good to have community. And in terms of the benefits of the whole process, do your clients, or have you yourself experienced any other benefits in addition to stopping drinking or reducing drinking of the naltrexone or the extinction, the Sinclair method? For example, I think because naltrexone is not specific to basically alcohol, the effects of alcohol. So it's just interface with a neurobiological pathway, that opioid pathway and the dopamine reinforcement. It's involved in many different processes in the brain and in behavior regulation. And so myself, with time, I started to notice that there were other compulsive type behaviors that were also alleviated by that process. So I mentioned that I had behaviors that were quite intimately linked with my alcohol use. I would basically, but that's what I did when I drank. So I would get drunk and I would get online and speak with people online. And so that was another behavior that I had to deal with, that I still had cravings for, even when I quit drinking. But I found that behaviors like that, so desires like that involve like obsessions and compulsions, and the necessary self-regulation improved for me also, as a result of the Sinclair method and the naltrexone. So that's what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I have seen that, and I've looked into research as well. I have a success story on my podcast of a gentleman. His name was Don. He shared openly on the interview that he went on naltrexone to help with his drinking, and it also helped with his compulsive sex disorder. He was not expecting that, but it went away along with his drinking. If you look at research, it is used for that, for porn addiction, compulsive sex addiction. There's been a little research on marijuana use disorder. It seems like the jury's out, but anecdotally, I've seen some success with it helping with marijuana use disorder. There's kind of two studies out there. They contradict each other that I'm aware of. But some people use it for weight loss. It is combined with another medication for a weight loss. But I have a woman in our program who she finds that she doesn't want to eat as much. And if you look at the book, which is about this treatment called The Cure for Alcoholism, he talks about a woman with a binge chocolate eating disorder who used naltrexone to help with that. And what else? I mean, it is used for opioid use disorder, but not in the same way. It's supposed to help with cravings. And if people take opiates on naltrexone, they won't feel the effects of it. So it works differently, but some people do use it for that. Yeah, gambling. I don't know if I mentioned that one. Shopping. I know someone who's done it for compulsive online shopping. Yeah, I think you were talking about earlier, like perhaps there's going to be more research, or needs to be more research into this, because it is a really powerful medicine that I think can be used for all types of compulsive behaviors. And some of them have been researched, and yeah, it's shown to be effective with some of those.
Yeah, so I completely agree that it has a lot of potential in those. There are studies also for amphetamine use disorder, people who have that. It's psychostimulant type of addiction. So I think this is again, it's because it's the pathway that is affected by naltrexone is not specific for drinking and opioid use, even though we call it opioid receptor and opioid pathway, and the dopamine reinforcement. It's involved in any kind of reinforcement and motivation, any process, even in normal. I also explained, you mentioned the eating. So when I was on the Sinclair method, I lost a lot of weight. That was quite, but in the end, actually, it became quite concerning, because I was already so thin. People pointed out to me I was not big to start, and I was never overweight. But I wanted to lose a few pounds, but it became like over 20 pounds. So
Wow.
effortlessly. It's just because I just didn't have the desire to eat craft food.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and research regarding that, one area that I'm very excited about is how it affects neuroplasticity. These mechanisms in the brain that are involved in generating change, rewiring, and also epigenetic mechanisms that regulate how genes are expressed, how genes function. There are not many studies. Epigenetics has been one of my main areas of interest in research. I studied myself, not the Sinclair method or not naltrexone, but many other things in the context of addiction. So I would love to see more studies. For the people who might be interested in this, do you think, in your experience, do you think that there is Anyone specifically who is a good, especially good candidate for Sinclair Method success, or is it for anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it a bit earlier. Like people who drink for the reward, the euphoria, the positive, uplifting effects of alcohol, those people tend to be the best responders to naltrexone. It doesn't mean, if you're drinking for the sedating or numbing effects or to escape or cope with emotions, it doesn't mean it won't work for you. I've seen it work for those people, but there's typically, more work that needs to be done, I guess, to develop the coping skills, you could say, because oftentimes when alcohol is used, for example, to numb emotions, naltrexone, even if you're taking naltrexone, it's not going to be blocking that effect of alcohol. Then emotions can still get numb and you can still use it to like pass out or fall asleep or things like that. So naltrexone will be blunting the euphoric effects, the feel-good effects, but it's not going to be preventing you from getting drunk. And that's a common misunderstanding. I don't know if you see it, but I see it in my comments a lot on my videos. Like, what? This medication doesn't get you drunk, so you'll drink way too much, which just isn't true. You can still get drunk on naltrexone. It's just not going to be as euphoric or pleasurable. But yeah, typically people who drink for like the pleasure reward are better candidates. Also, like if someone's physically dependent on alcohol where they're drinking around the clock, they're probably not an ideal candidate for the Sinclair method for a few different reasons. I have a couple stories, at least one story on my YouTube channel of a gentleman who he went to detox first and became, detox from the alcohol, became sober, and then did the Sinclair method to reach pharmacological extinction. So that's just an example of someone who is physically dependent on alcohol, probably wouldn't have done well with TSM because they would struggle with compliance. The body's using it to avoid withdrawal, or the body needs the alcohol to avoid withdrawal, so it's difficult to reduce. But he went through a detox first and then did TSM with success. And it's interesting because he had a severe case of alcohol addiction, but he reached pharmacological extinction in like 3 months. It was just like very quick because I think he really wanted it and took the treatment very seriously. But sometimes people think, oh, if someone has a severe case of alcohol addiction, this is going to take them a while. And that's not necessarily true. The thing with this treatment, as you mentioned, like there's some testing to know if you're a candidate for the medication. That's not commonly or widely used. And in my experience, like if someone is open to it or they're curious or they want to try it, like there's no harm in trying it. Naltrexone's a pretty benign medicine in the US. It's pretty easy to get a prescription now. Worst case scenario, you try it and it's not for you. But I will say, if someone is trying it, be sure to have the right understanding of what to expect, that this treatment takes time. It's not a quick fix. There's ups and downs, but over time, it can really be life-changing.
Anything like a gender distribution, like you see more men or women or any other gender succeeding or interested in it?
In our program, I would say it's pretty evenly 50-50, like with women and men joining. I would say we do get people who are more in their retirement age who are interested in the treatment because maybe they've gotten bored in retirement and what was like, a normal relationship with alcohol kind of escalated into something worse. But with that said, we have people who are in their 30s, 40s, like all age range, male, female. As far as like who it works better for, I have to say that it goes back to like that desire and readiness to change. I have a member in our program who she's been on the medication for 3 years. Her drinking's reduced, but she's like hardly had any alcohol-free days. And we had a call recently and she admitted, which was something I was observing in her, but she admitted like, I just haven't been ready to have an alcohol-free day. Like I genuinely didn't want an alcohol-free day. She was like religious with taking naltrexone and following the protocol, but she wasn't really ready to do anything else. And so it's this question of like, which part of that is the Sinclair method not working versus which part of it is like the person who needs to meet the medicine halfway to make the behavior changes, because naltrexone quiets the craving, but it's not going to change our habits or give us a different coping skill or help us cultivate different hobbies and ways to spend our time when we're not drinking. Like that's where we come in to, meet the medicine halfway and, help it do its job essentially. And so, Yeah, it's hard to say, and I know there are genetics involved, and some people maybe just won't respond as well, but it's like a mystery to me, like the human component, like where does naltrexone stop and we start essentially to help the treatment and medication work in the best way possible.
Yeah, anything that can be a counter indication, so that people who have with certain conditions that they are better not to take naltrexone.
As far as I know, the primary one is if someone is on like opioid pain medication for chronic pain, they cannot take naltrexone because it's an opiate blocker and it could send you into withdrawal if you have opiates in your system. So that is one case. I haven't really heard of other issues. I mean, it would be a question of talking to your doctor if you're pregnant, of course, if you have other health conditions or other medications you're on. But from what I've learned with the doctors we work with, like people are on all types of medication and they're also on naltrexone. So that's what I've observed.
And do you have can you share any kind of numbers, like a percentage of what percentage of people tend to succeed? And I'm also interested in how many people end up quitting drinking completely, giving it up, and how many versus how many continue.
I recently did a poll of this, but I'm drawing a blank on the number of people, like the percentage wise, like how many people quit versus how many people drink moderately. But I will say, like in David Sinclair's research, it demonstrated that this treatment has a 78% success rate. And I would say that's probably what I see in my program, maybe even higher than that. And what I see with most people is most people, maybe 95%, start this treatment with a goal to drink less. And they do that gradually over time. Maybe even a year in, they can't imagine quitting drinking. But as they progress on the treatment and continue using it, it just seems like it works better and better the longer someone's on it. So like I did an interview recently on my YouTube. She's been on the treatment for 4 years and it's just now at a place where she's like, I don't really drink anymore. Like it's just been this gradual process over 4 years of losing interest in alcohol. So what I see happen for a lot of people is they start the treatment to drink less. They do that. And then as they progress, their goals kind of change and they end up going alcohol free. Or one of our coaches, she drinks like a couple times a year. It's so just like infrequent. She's basically alcohol free, but she can have the holiday cocktail or whatever. So I would say most people go on it to drink less. And then a lot of those people do end up quitting drinking, which is, I think that's what happened to me. I mean, you as well. Yeah. But I think what's cool about the treatment is it doesn't demand abstinence. And for a lot of us, for me at least, it's like I can wrap my mind around drinking less. Like the thought of never drinking again, like that seems too far away. And so people I work with, they'll often say, oh, if I just don't want to drink in the future, that would be fine too, but I'm not there yet. And the treatment helps you get there.
Yeah, in my experience, the biggest benefit was not having to worry as much. It's just basically losing this, so not having to deal with this constant fight, fighting the cravings. It's just letting it go and, just drink and then see what happens. And it affects those pathways unconsciously. We don't need to continuously think about it. So that's also the suggestions that I received online from people who went through the process when I was starting, that don't overthink, just trust the process. So this is basically we are just working with a biochemical pathway, and it will take time, and it doesn't involve thinking won't improve it as much. So that was the biggest, so it was such a relief for me that because it was so hard, we talked about the cravings and the trying to fight those cravings for so many years, and failing and succeeding sometimes, and then failing and feeling horrible, and then starting over and just giving over the top, and then just with this flow. So thank you very much. So last question is, how can people reach you and your media, and how can people,
Yeah.
if they need help or if they are just interested in the resources that you have?
Yeah, and I just want to say it's been so awesome to talk with you. It's so nice to meet someone else who has personal experience with the method and is just really passionate about the neuroscience and stuff too. It's something I could talk about for hours. So thank you for having me. And they can find us on our website, thrivealcoholrecovery.com. social medias are all the same handle on our website. On the bottom right, they can find our social channels there. We also have a resources tab, which has a lot of free resources like understanding if the Sinclair method is right for you, different kind of resources that dive into the treatment for people to learn more about it. Also just have information on the website about naltrexone and the Sinclair method and basically how it works, so someone can get a practical understanding of that. And if they want support or they want to get started, they can also do that from the website as well. But I'm putting out videos all the time on YouTube, on our TikTok and other social platforms. So if you just want to like dip your toe in the water and get introduced to like what the heck this treatment is and learn more about it, you can follow us there as well.
Yeah, we will link all these resources for the viewers in the description. So thank you again very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much.